What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now, as you saw in the last video, we were able to get the backside of Project Cb9 converted from a 4-lug to a 5-lug setup. And now it's time to go ahead and move on to the front side, which hopefully should be a lot easier, but I just don't want to jinx it. But first things first, we need to head to the yard and get the knuckle assemblies from the correct car so we can actually get started. And from there, I'll show you all the steps and tools needed in order to convert your CB7 or Cb9 Accord front end to a 5-lug setup. Without further ado, let's go ahead and take a ride to the yard. 1999 Honda Accord V6. I need to get the entire hub assembly for the Cb9 conversion on the 5-lug, so go ahead and pull these off and see how quickly we can grab these. Hubs look to be in pretty good shape, not too much rust for a 1999, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started on removing this hub. Okay, here's what we're working with. This is from a 1999 Honda Accord EX-V6 front knuckle assembly. Now, I believe you want to aim for the EX-V6. I've been reading that the LX-V6 may not work, and I believe there's some indication on the backside of this knuckle. Let me go ahead and show you guys. And right here on the dust shield, you see this S5. That's what you're looking for right there. Now, we need to go ahead and prepare this knuckle before we go ahead and put it in the car. So you see this lower ball joint right here? We're gonna go ahead and replace this lower ball joint. And we're gonna go ahead and use some Honda OEM ball joints. So there's the part number for your reference if you want to use OEM Honda ball joints. And in order to get these lower ball joints out, you're gonna need some special tools. So I went up to AutoZone and rented 2 tools. This is the ball joint press set right here. That's the model number you'll need. And you'll need the Honda ball joint fittings right there. So let me go ahead and show you guys what these things look like. So right here is the Honda ball joint fittings. And then right here is a ball joint press. You can see it's seen this day, but this thing is supposed to be built strong. And as you can see, a lot of use right here. I'm pretty sure this is a forged unit right here. So what we're gonna try and do is put this ball joint press right here, use the Honda fittings, and basically drive this old ball joint upwards. Now, I've read before, we're gonna have to cut this stud right here because this thing might be flopping when I'm trying to press this out. I'm gonna see if I can get this thing put together and driven out without cutting it, but worst comes to worst, I'll go ahead and cut this thing off. And I need to go find my impact wrench in order to make this thing functional. So let's go ahead and get this old ball joint removed. All right, guys, successfully drove in the new ball joint. Let me go ahead and show you guys what I did to do that. So all these pieces right here are from the Honda ball joint kit. So what you want to do, take this big piece of the flat end and take this collar right here and slide it on the inside. You're going to extend that right there. Then you're going to slip it on the bottom side right there. As you can see, the ball joint can actually come right through. Now, I tried to use this spacer right here up on the top of this ball joint press. However, at first, it was driving this thing in crooked, so I got better results by not using actually a fitting on the top there. Basically just tighten this thing up, and then once you have your press all tightened up, then you'll take your 7/8 socket with your electric impact, tighten up right here, and this press will actually draw a new ball joint into the knuckle fitting right here. So that's basically how you replace lower ball joints on a Honda right there. So let's go ahead and do the second side while we got all the tools out. Okay, moving on to the disassembly of the Cb9 Knuckle. We're going to go ahead and start removing the brake caliper. So there's a 14mm bolt right here and another 14mm bolt right here. Once those bolts are removed, I can take the caliper, slide it forward, and all these mounting bolts up here on the knuckle, I believe these are 10mm. You want to go ahead and remove these from the knuckle assembly. And then you want to go ahead and take the tie rod end, take this cotter pin out. Now, I believe this is a 17mm. We'll go ahead and take that bolt out and remove this pin from knuckle assembly. And towards the top of the knuckle assembly, we'll go remove these two 2mm bolts right here, which is a cover. There should be a cotter pin. Remove that cotter pin, and there should be a 17mm bolt right there. Once that bolt's removed, we can actually take this upper ball joint and pop it out. All right, I went ahead and popped the hood, and now we need to work under here. Now this orange line right here, this is your ABS sensor. So basically you need to squeeze this thing and pull it apart. Okay, I can't do this on camera with one hand, so I'll have to do this off camera, but basically squeeze this tab, pull it that way. And this little clip right here on the strut tower. Just be careful moving this clip, not to scratch up the paint. So once this clip is removed and this harness is removed, we'll go inside the fender well, and we'll carefully move this rubber grommet, and all the wiring should come right out. So let's go ahead and take care of this ABS sensor. All right, there's only 3 more bolts holding this knuckle in position. So you got right here at the top, that's a 17mm. Already took the cotter pin out. And you got this axle nut right here. So go ahead and put your 36mm socket and take your electric impact and get that axle nut off. And then right here on the underside, there's your bottom ball joint. Go ahead and take that cotter pin out and take that 17mm. And we'll go ahead and pop this free with our Pitman arm tool. And once the upper ball joint, lower ball joint, axle nut is free, I should be able to take this knuckle assembly and just totally remove this thing. So let's go ahead and get the Cb9 knuckle removed from the car. CB9 4-lug knuckle assembly is finally removed, and there it is right there. Now before we go ahead and put the 5-lug assembly into position, we're going to do a suspension overhaul. So we're going to place these bushings right here on the sway bar. We're going to place this lower control arm right here. So basically we need to undo this 17mm right here from the shock. And I believe this is a 14mm. You're going to need a deep socket in order to get these bushings off for the sway bar. And I believe these are 17mm right underneath the shock right there. So there's one bolt right there, one bolt right there. And right behind the axle is another 17mm bolt, which holds it onto the body. So let's go ahead and undo those bolts and replace the lower control arm. And after the lower control arm is replaced, we'll go ahead and do the bushings next step. All right, lower control arm is removed, along with the sway bar bushings as well. So as you can see, this is the old lower control arm, and just look at that cracked bushing right there on the bottom side, and what goes in the body right there. I don't know if you can see the hairline cracks, but yeah, these things are definitely worn out. And here's the new unit, nice fresh bushings. This will give a nice tighter ride. And there it is, closer to the hub right there. Now when you reinstall this, go ahead, put the 17mm bolt on the body, and then we'll go ahead and connect the sway bars in the lower suspension right here. All right, next up in the process is this upper control arm. Now I can't remove this from the fender well, so we have to go in engine bay. And at least here on the driver's side, you have a bolt right here, and then you got a bolt underneath this wiring harness, about right there. Might be able to access that with a crow's foot, we'll find out, but we can definitely hit this with a socket. So this nut and this nut right here is a 17mm. Let's go ahead and remove those nuts. All right guys, next day here, my camera battery actually went dead, so I'm gonna go ahead and leave off where I stopped at on the passenger side. So I went ahead and got the knuckle assembly removed and got the upper control arm removed. Now one thing to note on removing the upper control arm, it's a little tricky here on the passenger side. As you can see, I had to undo 3 10mm bolts on this fuse box, one right here, one right there, and one right there. And then I had to undo these cables right here from the fuse box and this harness. And now I'm able to lift upwards on this fuse box. Now if you can see the hole right there between the black and red cable, that's where I had to put a swivel with 17mm. It's very tricky to get that bolt off. And then over here by the ABS fuse box, there's a second bolt right there. This is a little tricky to get to as well. Had to use a crow's foot in order to get this one off. So just a little FYI on the passenger side. Okay, so this is the factory upper control arm. We're actually going to reuse this arm, but however, we're going to switch out the bushings on both sides, and we're actually going to change out this upper ball joint. And as you can see here with the upper ball joint, this thing is probably original to the car. Rubber boot is toast. We're gonna go ahead and switch this out with an adjustable one from SPC, since this car is gonna be lowered and we need camber adjustment. And this right here is the aftermarket control arm. Only thing we need from this is this part and this part. It's got brand new bushings on it. And these are two 14mm bolts. So when we remove and tighten from the OEM, you'd have 2 wrenches in order to hold this in position. So let's go ahead and take these old mounts and bushings off the OEM upper control arm and take the ones off the aftermarket and swap it onto that one. Okay, now that we've got the new bushings and mounts installed in the OEM upper control arm, next step, you need to go ahead and remove this upper ball joint. In order to do so, there's a snap ring. So we need to go ahead and take a flathead screwdriver and basically pop this ring out. And the next step, I'm gonna go ahead and take the ball joint press and press this thing outwards so we can go ahead and put our new upper ball joint in place. So let's go ahead, pop out this snap ring, and then take the ball joint press and pop this old guy out. Okay, now that I got the old ball joint out of the upper control arm, let's go ahead and move on to the new ball joint. We're going to be installing the SPC adjustable ball joint, which has up to 3 degrees of adjustability. This is number 67340. And this is basically what this adjustable ball joint looks like. As you can see, it's pretty beefy, but you know, this thing slides actually. As you can see, the amount of adjustability this thing has is pretty crazy. But being this car is going to be lowered 2.5 to 3 inches, we're definitely going to need this thing. So in order to get this thing mounted, I want to take this top bolt right here. It's just a little bit over 1 inch, so I'd use a crescent wrench. Go ahead and take this bolt off right here. Now pay attention to all the sequence of how this thing's put together. So you got the main nut right here. There's a washer. There's the upper plate. And this right here is where it mounts the underside of the upper control arm, in that groove right there. Now the reason that we're reusing the upper control arm that's OEM is because of the fact that this accepts OEM only. The aftermarket, it's either larger or smaller, so that's why we're doing so. So in order to install this thing, this groove right here has to fit inside like so. And this ball joint is actually able to slide just like that. And then we'll go ahead and mount the top hardware on top here, tighten things up. So let's go ahead and take care of this. Okay, here's the wrap of things. Here's the upper control arm. It is bolted in position in the engine bay and got the new bushings and fittings into place. Now I left these bolts loose right now so I can actually move this thing up and down. And when we go ahead and attach this to the knuckle, we'll go ahead and tighten those bolts up on the top right there. And last but not least, got the adjustable SPC ball joint installed on the factory control arm. And moving down below, we've got the new lower control arm in position. Tightened up the bolt for the shock. Obviously this bolt is tightened up on the body. Got the two 17mm tightened up right here. And we got new bushings here on the sway bar. Okay, here's our Cb9 Knuckle Assembly. And here's our 5-lug cord assembly right here. Now before we go ahead and mount this on the car, we need to go ahead and prepare this, specifically the ABS line right here. Now from the factory, this is what the 1999 Accord looks like, this bracket. And as you can see right here with the Cb9, that bracket looks totally different. This is basically the miniature bracket that clamps on the inside fender. So what I did is I went ahead, took a screwdriver, pried this open. It's basically clamped around these rubber pieces. And over time, these rubber pieces just bond to the wire with all the clamping force. So I had to get a little miniature flathead screwdriver, jam it under here a few times, and this thing is now able to move back and forth. So we'll be able to do some adjustment. So this is the grommet for the 1999 Accord right here. And this is the grommet from Cb9. As you can see, rubber versus plastic. But I'm gonna go ahead and test the diameter of this thing on the fender. But I think this little plastic gap right here on the top has to be ground down in order to make a fitment. As you can see, there's locking tabs right there. Okay, so let's go over on how to install the knuckle assembly. So what I'm gonna do when I maneuver the knuckle assembly into position, I'm gonna put the lower ball joint into the lower control arm right here, and I'm gonna feed the axle right through the opening. And then we'll go ahead, connect the tie rod end, and then last but not least, the upper ball joint right here. So let's go ahead and mount up the 5-lug knuckle assembly. Okay, the 5-lug knuckle assembly went in pretty easily. Didn't take too long. Now go ahead, tighten up these 17mm, put the cotter pins in place. Same thing with the tie rods. And also here on the bottom for the ball joint. And then last steps, we're gonna go ahead and put the axle nut on there, tighten that to 181 foot-pounds. And then up here at the top, don't forget the upper control arm, these two 14mm. So tighten this up right here, and tighten this bolt up right here, 14mm. So once the upper control arm's tightened up and the axle nut is in place, we'll go ahead and adjust the brakes. Now, I did a side-by-side comparison on the brakes. Now, these are the 99 Accord brakes right here, and this is Cb9. I think the Cb9 has beefier brakes than the Cb7, correct me if I'm wrong, but these are identical in size. So I don't have to bleed brakes, so I'm gonna go ahead and take off the 99 Accord caliper. I'm gonna put the Cb9 caliper into place, and then we'll bolt it right in position, and hopefully it goes smooth. So I'll go and address those after the upper control arm and the axle nut. Okay, let me go ahead and show you guys what I did in order to finalize some things on this 99 Accord knuckle assembly. Now, first things first, on the Cb9 brake line, it's got two openings, one right here, one right there. And however, the 99 Accord knuckle assembly, the brake line bracket only has one opening for a bolt, and you got a little notch right here. So it's a different design than the Cb9. CB9 has 2 openings for bolts. And the solution to that is I went in my spare nuts and bolts box, found this nut and bolt right here, and it's securing it pretty well. So you got the CB9 bracket holding it to the 99 Accord brake bracket right here. So I think this is pretty secure, ain't going nowhere. And then with the ABS line, I'm not able to use a bracket that holds on the inner fender well because this line is shorter than the CB9. So what I had to do is move these rubber pieces right here, and this plastic grommet fits snugly on top of that. Had to take a razor blade and cut the top off of this plastic grommet. It fits in that hole perfectly. So I think this is a pretty good situation right here. And as I just mentioned, this line is pretty tight. I was able to route the wire right behind the air box right here. It actually connects to the factory connector perfectly without having to splice any wires. And this CB9 connector is held in place with the metal OEM bracket right there. So this thing is pretty secure, ain't going nowhere. So next step on the driver's side, I need to do the same thing. Make the connection right here. And then in the fender well, you need to modify the spacing of these rubber pieces. And then we need to make sure that this plastic grommet will plug in perfectly to this hole right here and not have this line either too tight or too loose. So I'm gonna go ahead and take care of this off camera, and that about wraps up the 5-lug conversion for Project CB9. Okay, as you can see here, that this task requires a lot of tools. So let me go ahead and show you what I used here. Electric 3/8 ratchet if you have one. 1/2-inch impact ratchet, very important, very helpful. Sockets, 8mm, 10mm, 14mm, and 17mm. Impact sockets, 17mm, 19mm, 7/8, and a 36mm. 17mm crow's foot, 1/2-inch swivel, 1/2-inch breaker bar, 1/4-inch ratchet, 3/8 ratchets, 1/2-inch ratchet, 3/8 extensions, 1/2-inch extension, Pitman arm puller, various pliers, clip remover, small flathead screwdriver, Phillips head screwdriver, flathead screwdriver, 1/2-inch torque wrench, rubber mallet, miniature sledgehammer, bungee cord to support your brake caliper or your axle, wrenches, 10mm, 12mm, 14mm, 15mm, and 17mm. And that there, folks, is the majority of the tools I use in order to get this job done. All right, guys, that about wraps up the 5-lug conversion on the front side of Project CB9, along with the suspension rebuilding as well. Now, for those wondering what knuckles work for the CB7 or CB9, this is what I know. First option, first gen Honda Odyssey from model years 1994 to 1998. Second option, 6th gen Honda Accord EXV6 from model years 1999 to 2002. Third option, 2nd gen Acura 3.2 TL from model years 1999 to 2003, base model Aura Type S. And the fourth option, 2nd gen Acura 3.2 CL from model years 2001 to 2003, also base model Aura Type S. Anyhow, if y'all have any questions on this 5-lug conversion or suspension rebuilding, feel free to comment below and I'll do my best to answer all questions. And hope y'all can stay tuned for the next video where I show you how to install coilover suspension on the 4th and 5th gen Accords. And if you guys like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Thanks for watching and have a fantastic day.